All right, we're going to try this again because I just found out that there was no sound. What do you mean I can't turn my phone while recording? All right. Like I said, the joys of watching someone who doesn't know what they're doing on Facebook. Let's try this again. Let me make sure that I can actually be seen here. Cool. Okay, we're going to try this again because I was just told that there was no sound. So we're going to delete the previous live, but if you already watched it, you got to stand there and watch me just flap my lips. So I guess that's a great trial run. So what I want to talk to you guys about is a subject that's actually coming up, and it's pretty popular today, somewhat polarizing, is the concept of electrification. Now, before I get too far, I'm going to actually check my phone and see if there's any comments. There are not. Okay. I assume the sound is working this time. So, I want to talk about electrification. What is it? What does it mean for you? And is electrification something that's right for you? So the first question is, what is electrification? And electrification is the process of replacing fossil fuel systems with electric alternatives. The biggest electric alternatives that are talked about today are home heating and cooling. That consists of your furnace or air conditioner and water heating. It also focuses on cooking and can also be your car. Most vehicles today are internal combustion engines, and there is a push to go with electric counterparts. So, one of the driving forces behind going to electrification is energy efficiency as well as emissions. Gas furnaces do produce carbon emissions because they're burning fossil fuels, hydrocarbons. Gas furnaces typically max out at about 98% efficiency if you have purchased such a furnace. Heat pumps can typically reach 350 or even as high as 450% efficiency. And they do reduce carbon emissions because they do not have on-site combustion. Now, I did the air quotes because here in the Dayton area, and pretty much everywhere across the nation, the majority of our electricity, in fact, California's energy report, they get at least 50% of their electricity from fossil fuel producing sources. Other things that we look at for drivers of electrification are federal policies, tax credits and rebates, and also rising fuel prices. One additional item we have are energy efficiency and climate goals. Over in the European Union, they have what's called net zero commitments. I think they call it Goal 2050, and they want a lot of places to be net zero energy by 2050. I'm going to do one more check and see if anybody said anything about sound. Okay. Like I said, not professional Facebook Live people here, so hopefully this is enjoyable for you. Decarbonization is another term, and it's somewhat similar to electrification, but electrification is the method by which we decarbonize. So we're actually looking to reduce carbon emissions from energy use. Now, your home heating and cooling is typically 40% or more of your home's energy usage. So it makes sense that that would be a major target to actually reduce not only your energy usage, but your carbon emissions and footprint and all that other good stuff. So, what about the politics? Because I think the politics is probably the bigger thing that people see. And I want to talk about it from both sides because, again, we need to make an honest and informed decision about what's right for our homes, not what's perceived to be right by somebody else, including me. It's not my job to tell you what's best for your home. It's my job to give you the best solutions that are available so you can make an informed decision on your own. So, some of the things that we need to look at politics-wise are federal and state policies. With the Inflation Reduction Act, there are tax credits that make it actually sometimes financially beneficial to actually switch to electric heating instead of gas. We also have state mandates. Look at California and New York, for example. I don't know that New York has officially done it, but they were at least looking to ban gas stoves. I believe that is still happening, but I'm not 100% sure on that, so don't quote me. California is pushing bans on internal combustion engines. It's my understanding that you cannot buy a gas-powered weed whacker or a generator or a tiller in that state, and I think they're pushing to do the same for cars and trucks if they have not done so already. Now, obviously, the industry is going to get into it as well. Why would we even bring that up? Well, here's the thing. If the state and the government is saying you're not allowed to make furnaces, well, of course they're going to push for heat pumps and high-efficiency heating and cooling systems that don't run on gas if it's going to be banned. So if one manufacturer doesn't make it, another will. So obviously a manufacturer wants to sell equipment because that's how you stay in business. So of course they're going to lobby for it. They're going to push it. So on the other side, what else do we have? We have concerns about grid capacity. We all know that most of the houses here in the Dayton area, unless it's a brand spanking new house, probably has 100 amp service or less to it. Now that home has a gas furnace, a gas water heater. It may very well have a gas clothes dryer. It may have a gas stove as well, if I didn't already say that. So if we take a house that has 100 amp service, or some of my customers even have 60 amp service still, if you believe that, fused panels and all. Those homes are going to require an extensive retrofit to actually electrify. Now, above and beyond that, we have concerns about our existing electrical grid. For example, if you have a neighborhood full of the aforementioned type of house that has a 60 amp service, you might need a 200 or 300 amp service depending on how you choose to electrify. Well, you add 100 to 200 amps of required electrical service to every single house in the neighborhood. The power company not only has to produce more electricity, but you have an extensive grid that you have to update as well. So, one other thing that we look at is, what does the consumer want? Most of you like to have more than one option. Some people would rather just say, look, this is it, this is the one option, this is all we're doing. You don't get anything else. And some people are very happy with that. Other people are going to say, I don't want you to back me into a corner. I want gas, I want electricity, I want, a generator, or what have you. So we have to look at how people actually perceive this. Now, what are some benefits? Well, if you have a gas furnace that maxes out at, say, 80% efficiency, you can get a more efficient furnace, but you might say, Well, it doesn't really get that cold anyways, and I don't keep my house that hot. I'd like to explore whether one of those 450% efficient heat pumps would be right for me. Well, that may very well save you money. It's an honest discussion that we can have. Now, if you have a house from the 1950s that doesn't have very good insulation, and your ductwork used to be a gravity furnace, going to a heat pump would be very, very expensive, and it may or may not be something that we can actually do unless there's an extensive retrofit. So that may not be right for you. Now, if we look at future-proofing a house, well, New York and California are working on gas bans. You might one day be in your house and the state rule, no more gas. We're shutting it off as of this date, and you need to have a phase-out plan for it. Well, if your home is already electrified, we can use other things to generate electricity so that you can heat and cool your home. I don't know that that's necessarily valid, because I don't think the gas company is necessarily going anywhere. Now, if we actually run out of gas one day, that's a completely different story. Previously, we mentioned some incentives and rebates. Depending on what your actual financial situation is, depending on what your tax situation is, or various rebates and incentives at the time, it may actually be cost effective for you to actually explore electrification. One more check to make sure nobody has said anything. Okay, we assume the sound is working. Second time is a charm. Now let's talk about a couple of the challenges. Some of these are going to be repeated, but it's worth having an actual discussion about them. So, one of the things that I mentioned already is that electrification does bring on concerns about grid reliability. We all know what happens in the summertime when it gets up in the 80s and the 90s. We start having things come out on the news from the power company where they say, don't use your air conditioner unless you absolutely have to, or we recommend you set your thermostat to 78 or 80. Well, sorry power company, most people don't like it 80 degrees in their house. That's generally when I get a phone call of my AC ain't working, it's hot in here. Most people like between 68 and 75. So, there are concerns about this. Some people will say, well, California doesn't have enough electricity to actually run their air conditioner. I don't know if you know this or not, but in California, they actually plan what they call rolling blackouts. They'll actually shut down a portion of the grid for, an hour or two because there's so much demand for electricity that the power generation cannot generate enough power. So the grid will either completely go down or they have to shut down portions of it so that they can actually keep the electrical grid up and running. That way places like hospitals and fire stations and stuff can actually still operate. Also aforementioned are retrofitting costs. If you look at having to replace a gas furnace and an air conditioner with a heat pump, that's an expense. If you have a gas stove, you have to convert that to electricity. So every one of these items, a gas dryer, a water heater, anything that is gas that has to be converted to electricity, not only do you have to purchase the particular appliance, but you also have to not only have the electrical wire run for your house, but you may also have to upgrade your electrical panel, which, depending on, if you've got a fuse box, if it's a 60 amp service, you may have to look at some very significant expenses to be able to electrify. Now, the politics does get involved too. Some people see it as a climate solution. I've heard both sides of the story of, I'm doing this because I want to be more eco-friendly, or some people will say, well, you don't love the environment because you have gas. So it's polarizing that way. Some people see it as a threat to energy freedom. I previously mentioned energy choice. Some people might say, I don't want electric. If you've grown up with an oil furnace or a gas furnace, or you had radiant in-floor heat, you don't like electricity because it doesn't produce the hot air that you're used to. Now, there are great advancements in heat pump technology, and they actually have some heat pumps that can produce 110, 120, sometimes even 130 degree air coming out of the vents, just like a gas furnace. But there's still that perception by some people that that's just not what they want. They're used to the old school Florida heat pump that didn't really work that great below 40 degrees. It didn't put out hot air, and it ran all the time. That is a perception that we have to deal with in this industry, and it's not one that should be just tossed off. It's a valid concern by people. So we need to look at the politics and what people actually see. Now, we also have structure limitations. So in some of the cities around here, such as Oakwood, for example, a lot of the houses there are very, very, very old. And when they were first heated, they were heated with coal-fired gravity furnaces. Well, as those homes were upgraded, it was real easy to replace all the ductwork in the basement because the basements were not finished. But nobody ripped the ductwork out of the walls. So with a gravity furnace, the ductwork actually ran up in the stud space, so it was a very, very, very small duct. And the houses generally heat okay, but they don't air condition very well. And one of the things that we have to look at with a heat pump is it requires more airflow to get the BTUs of heat up there. So if your home already doesn't air condition very well upstairs, there is a chance that going to a heat pump may actually make things more uncomfortable unless your contractor comes out, looks at the ductwork, and says, okay, this ductwork is not big enough. And we either have to upsize the ductwork, add additional ductwork, or put a second system upstairs to electrify. Otherwise, you're not going to be comfortable. Now, it's not fun to think about, oh, I have to have 2 systems in my house now? That's a lot of money. You see the dollar signs start running around in people's heads. But I don't want you to get a heat pump system and be uncomfortable with it. I don't like to hear things like, I hate that heat pump. Because there are people who hate them because they've had a bad experience with them. And I'm perfectly happy to talk to people about that. But we have to understand that you cannot just rip out a gas furnace, throw a heat pump in, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. You just can't do it. So what's next? We've covered kind of the basis of all of this stuff that's going on, but when are we actually going to talk about, well, what does Frank think? Because I know that's what you're all thinking, like, what is this guy's opinion? Well, we're going to actually not base this on my personal opinion. What we're going to do is do a real-world test. Now, I think you can see this furnace over here. No, you can't. Let me turn the camera. There we go. You can see this furnace right here. This is a real-world test. This furnace has been in for about 2 or 3 weeks. Now, what was here before was an electric air handler. I got the heat pump sitting out back still, and it's going to get hooked back up soon because I don't have any air conditioning in here right now. But this exact furnace has been compared to the performance of the heat pump out back. And we're going to actually compare operation of a heat pump with electric heat to this gas furnace. Because I want you to have real-world data. I'm going to switch the camera back to the slide now. See, we're ultra professional here. Ultra professional. So we're going to compare gas heating and electric heating And we've got actual runtime data recorded from the thermostat. We have actual costs from my very own electric and gas bill, which is going to be similar to yours. And we're going to talk about what does it cost to run that furnace for an hour? What does it cost to run the heat pump for an hour? What does it cost to run the electric heat for an hour? And then we're going to look at how long do each of those actually run. Now, spoiler alert, when I had the heat pump in, I did not set the system to run on electric heat only for a week because I would have a very, very, very expensive electric bill, and my better half would be very upset with me about that. So we didn't do that. But we did leave the electric heat on as backup. So that's a real life comparison. Now, just to be fair, with the electric heat only, the electric heat output would have been pretty similar to the gas furnace. So I guess I could actually go through and tell you what that would cost if we ran on straight electric heat. So we could do that. I don't have that number calculated yet, but I may very well calculate that. I'm not sure yet. So why am I doing all this? I want you to have real data. This is not hype. This is not politics. This is not, oh, they're just a heating and air company and they want to sell me a new system. Okay, don't get me wrong. We'd love to do that because we're business. But I don't want you buying something for the wrong reason. I don't want you buying something because you're not well informed. Because you're going to find out sooner or later, and the last thing I want is for you to regret a decision that you've made. That's not right to you. So we're going to have real data, and we're going to show you what happened with this exact system. And it doesn't mean that this is going to be what your system does. It doesn't mean it fits your real-world application. But I'm not going to base data on some internet research or what somebody else says. I'm going to actually show you in my personal life what happened so that you can base it on yours. Because this is real, this is authentic, this is truthful, and this is what you need. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you do have questions, comments, etc., please put them in the comments. If I can figure out how to get to them, I will address them. And hopefully we'll have something next week for you as well on episode 2. And we're going to actually go over what our test setup is, because that's important as well. So anyways, go ahead and get back to your Saturday. I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope you've got a great weekend. And we'll see you next time.